Hi guys and welcome back to the Mighty Blues. My name is of course Cameron and welcome back today to another live stream. It is Friday. I hope you all are doing well. Hope you all have had a good weekend and are looking forward to, a good week and are looking forward to the upcoming week ahead. What am I talking about? A good week and looking forward to the upcoming weekend ahead. As you can tell, it's been quite a roller coaster week for us Evertonians. There's been a lot going on over the course of the last sort of 5, 6, 7 days or so. We are here today to talk about Everton's 1-0 win over Crystal Palace in the FA Cup third round replay. The Toffees progress into the fourth round of the competition where they will face Luton Town at Goodison Park on the 27th of January, a week tomorrow. Of course, in the next round, and it was a great win. It wasn't a particularly great game of football. It wasn't a particularly entertaining or exciting 90 minutes, and it was definitely a freezing cold 90 minutes of football. But we won the game. And ultimately, that's all that matters, and that was always the most important thing, not only because it meant that we progressed into the next round and stayed in the cup competition, but also because, as we'd spoken about a couple of times over the last few weeks or so, Everton had gone a month without winning a game of football, and although there had been certain games that we'd lost that we played well, or we battled and we maybe deserved more out of, it's still never good to go a prolonged period of time without winning a game of football, because even if there are reasons and excuses as to why you haven't won, ultimately at the end of the day you still haven't won. So it was great to get that win. We've obviously had the news of Everton being referred once again to an independent commission over a potential breach of profit and sustainability rules, meaning that we are set to undergo the same procedure we underwent earlier on in the season, where an independent commission is now going to gather the evidence, look at it, and determine whether or not Everton and Nottingham Forest should be punished. Obviously, the last time this happened, they determined Everton should have been punished with a 10-point deduction, which is absolutely baffling still to my brain. I don't quite understand how they came to that conclusion, but given that this second breach includes 2 of the same seasons in which we've already been punished for with the first breach, I find it incredibly just baffling that we can even be referred for something that we've already been punished for, and B, I don't see a world in where Everton can be punished twice for the same thing and it be deemed as fair, and it be deemed as an appropriate outcome to the situation. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So like I said, it has been an up and down week. I'm glad that it's Friday. I can't wait to sit down tonight with my feet up and not have to worry about Everton. Obviously no game this weekend. The next game is actually that fourth round tie against Luton Town next Saturday, so we can all have a weekend off of Everton. Hopefully there's no big news. Hopefully there's no dramas or news articles that leave us to be panicking and worrying. Hopefully we can just have one 48-hour period where we can just forget about it for the, as I said, for the weekend and enjoy ourselves. But listen, it's not all doom and gloom. As much as it's been, as I said, a pretty up and down week, and certainly one that has caused a lot of anxiety and stress, we've ultimately come off the end of it and come off the back of it with a big win in the FA Cup. Like I said, we've desperately needed to win this game for many reasons, but to go into the break on the back of a win, it just builds that confidence again, I think, and it just allows us to almost to put to the side the fact that we'd gone a month without winning a game, and put to the side some of the defeats and poor performances we'd put in recently, and look towards more of the positive, because there's 2 different ways of looking at Everton's form at the moment, and narrative is a big thing within football, and we've spoken a lot recently about narrative around Everton's points deduction and around Everton's financial breaches, because the narrative out there at the moment in the media is that Evertonians don't seem to be, holding their club to blame, and Evertonians don't seem to be putting any blame on the club. Instead, they're focusing all the attention on the Premier League, and that is just utter nonsense. it's utter nonsense, and that's the narrative that is being spun by journalists and being spun by the media about how Everton haven't concentrated on the football club and instead they're concentrating on the league. It's nonsense. We spent 18 months to 2 years protesting to get those people in charge of our football club out the door, and when we were doing that, it was ignored by the media because they were absolutely terrified to say anything against Everton's board, whereas now that the board have been removed and the focus has shifted onto the Premier League because we'd already spent 2 years protesting against the board, had them removed. Now it's not the same board that were responsible for putting us in this position. So why would we continue to protest against the board that A, don't exist, and B, when we protested against, they all ignored us, they being the media and the journalists. But now the attention is shifted onto the Premier League. All of a sudden, ironically, they all want to they all want to write their articles about how Everton's board need to be held accountable and it's the board's fault and etc, etc, etc. And as I've said before, and as we said in yesterday's video, big thank you to everybody that watched yesterday's video. By the way, obviously we were originally meant to be doing this review yesterday, but I had a couple of things on me mind and on me that I wanted to get off my chest, and I couldn't sit there and in me in work absolutely furious and not come on and do a video about it. So that's why we had to push this one back a little bit, so I do apologize for that. But as I said in that video yesterday, the narrative is at the moment in the media is that Everton ultimately shouldn't be blaming or aiming any of their ill feeling towards the Premier League, and it should all be aimed towards the board, and that is just completely wrong. If you haven't checked out that video, by the way, please do so, and big thank you to everybody that already has. But we do live in a world where we can hold more than one group of people or more than one organisation responsible for something happening, and whilst we can hold Everton's board accountable and responsible, which we have done numerous times. If you watch this channel at any point over the last 3 years, you'll know I certainly have done. We can also hold the Premier League accountable for A, their rule book being nonsense, and B, their punishment system and the way they come up with punishments for certain rule breaches not making any sense whatsoever and only applying to certain clubs and not others. So we've spoken about that an awful lot over the last few days, and I dare say we'll speak about it an awful lot more over the coming weeks and months as well. The important thing is that we won that game of football on Wednesday, and as I said, it's all about narratives, and there were two narratives surrounding Everton Football Club at the moment in terms of on the pitch. One of them was that we hadn't won a game of football since the 15th of December. So it'd been a month since we'd last won a game of football. We'd put in a really terrible performance against Wolves. We'd gotten a point against Aston Villa, which, on another day, maybe we get all three, maybe they get all three. And as I said, we'd lost a couple of games where we were a little bit unlucky in for various different reasons. That was the narrative going into this game against Crystal Palace. The narrative coming out of it is that Everton are unbeaten in 3 and have kept 3 clean sheets on the spin. And that is how quickly things can change and things can turn around in football. One win all of a sudden completely flips that narrative from being, well, Everton haven't won a game since the middle of December and they're struggling and they're doing really poor, etc., etc., to actually we're unbeaten in 3, we've kept 3 clean sheets on the spin. We could have beaten Aston Villa on another day. If Abdoulaye Doucouré just holds his run for a split second, we go on and beat Aston Villa. Obviously, we wrongfully had a man sent off in the first game against Crystal Palace, and we should have had a penalty in that game, so we could have quite comfortably beaten them, and then, we've beaten them on Thursday. So hopefully or Wednesday, sorry. So hopefully the momentum is starting to switch again in favour of Everton, and hopefully the players can take confidence and the players can take a little bit of momentum from that, especially coming out of the break as well. The last thing we needed was to go into the break off the back of a defeat and the worries and the anxiety and then all of this stuff with the breaches over our shoulder as well. We really, really needed to just focus on what is important, and ultimately at the end of the day, what is important is winning games of football, and what is important is Everton winning games of football, and that's all we can ask for. And, despite everything that is going on at the moment in the background and the breaches, and despite how angry and frustrated and upset we may be, I must admit I walked home from Goodison Park on Wednesday night absolutely freezing, by the way, and could barely feel my fingers. However, I had a smile on my face, and it reminded me that football is a very basic game, And the reason I got into football is because I loved this football club, and I would follow this football club through anything. And when this football club won a game of football, it made me the happiest I felt I could be. There wasn't many other things in life that could have happened to me as a child that would have made me as happy as Everton winning a game of football. Now that might sound sad, but it is what it is. What might sound even sadder is that it's very much still the same now. Obviously, as you get older, various different things happen, and you start to put things into perspective, but there's still very few feelings that feel better and feel as upbringing and as upbeat as when your football team wins a game of football. And I walked home on Wednesday night, and although I was freezing, and although I was I wasn't particularly entertained by the 90 minutes I'd just watched, I was absolutely over the moon because Everton had won, and it really put into perspective what matters. And really what matters to us football fans, it's not Everton's finances. I'm not an accountant, I'm not a lawyer, it's not the way Everton are ran, I'm not a businessman, I'm not a CEO. Ultimately, what matters to us as fans is the football team winning games of football. And when they don't win games of football, we start to explore the reasons why, and then we start to get into finances, and we start to get into the mismanagement of the football club. But when you narrow it all down, and when you look at the very basic of football fans and what they want and what they what they most enjoy, it's when their team wins a game of football, and Wednesday certainly gave me that feeling. Yeah, as I've said, it wasn't a particularly entertaining game of football whatsoever. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to get a half an hour, 40-minute review out of it, to be perfectly honest, because it was a typical Wednesday evening, -3, -4, -5, whatever it was degrees outside, FA Cup replay that, for me, just seemed like a little bit of an inconvenience. I said that, I think, on the instant match reaction, and somebody commented, when has the FA Cup ever been an inconvenience? How can you see the FA Cup as an inconvenience? I'm not saying the FA Cup as a competition is an inconvenience, because when Everton play Luton next week, it's a Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock. That is the prime time for a game of football to be played. No issue with it whatsoever. No inconvenience. No problem with it whatsoever. But having our winter break disturbed by a replay after the first game was an absolute horror fest in terms of how dull it was. Both teams weren't particularly great in that game either. To then have to play the same game again a couple of weeks later in the freezing cold conditions on a Wednesday night during what was supposed to be our winter break. We get told, oh, you get a winter break, the players get time to rest, the players get time to recover, the fans get time, etc., etc. But you don't, do you? You only get that if you pick up the results leading up to that mean you don't have to go and play a replay. Because instead, Crystal Palace, I think, had their break last week, so their break had been interrupted by the replay. They had to come back earlier, and Everton obviously would have been on their break from Sunday, and instead it was interrupted by the replay. So yeah, it is an inconvenience, and I firmly believe FA Cup replays are an inconvenience, and I know that I'm not saying they shouldn't exist, because I know that they're great for lower league clubs earning more money and being able to go and play at some of the bigger stadiums, and for the football pyramid, I'm sure they have their benefits, but for me, in this specific circumstance, this game was an inconvenience, and I think you could see that. I think you could see that on the pitch as well. I think both sets of players almost looked as if they just wanted to get it over and done with and go home. And like I said, it was a pretty dull 90 minutes of football, was it? Both teams were left a lot to be desired. I thought Crystal Palace were really, really poor in the game, really, really poor. And I've seen some people talking about how they were the better team and they deserved to win the game, and Everton were lucky to get out of it, etc., etc., etc. I just don't know what was being watched. For me, I thought Crystal Palace were the much better team for the last 6 minutes of the game. When the board went up and the assistant showed that there was going to be 6 minutes added on, it was almost like they thought, oh, right, let's have a go now. We'll get at these, we'll have a go, we'll put them under pressure, we'll try and get back in the game. But let's not forget that with 20 minutes to go, Roy Hodgson took off their best player and their most attacking player, which was met by boos from the Crystal Palace fans and chants of you don't know what you're doing. So I'm not quite sure where this whole thing of Crystal Palace were the much better team and they dominated the game comes from, because I don't think that's the case whatsoever. Do I think Everton dominated the game? Not particularly, no. Not particularly. I don't think either team dominated the game. If I'm being perfectly honest with you, I thought it was a pretty dull game. Both sides had a couple of half opportunities each. Obviously, the goal that won the game was an absolute worldie and come from a brilliant little bit of skill from Andre Gomez. But other than that, it was a game which lacked quality. It really, really did lack quality. It lacked quality. It lacked intensity. And I'm not saying the players weren't giving their all. I'm not saying the players weren't giving 110% and battling and putting themselves about, because I'm sure they were. But the reality of the situation is the pace of the game and the flow of the game just was slow and lethargic. And that ultimately was reflected in the atmosphere as well. I've seen a few Blues having a go at the atmosphere at Goodison Park on Wednesday night, but at the end of the day, when fans are sitting there in -3, -4 degree heat, and the players are sort of waltzing around, not really looking like they completely want to be there, and the opposition players aren't particularly giving much, it's difficult to get yourself excited. It's difficult to get yourself up for it as well. I mean, for anybody not at Goodison Park, you haven't seen the game. You've only seen the highlights, and you've only seen what people have told you or heard what people have told you, because it wasn't televised anywhere in the world, which I just find baffling. I find baffling how on a Wednesday night, when there is very little football going on around the world, a FA Cup fixture, the FA Cup, which deems itself the biggest cup competition in the world, the most prestigious cup competition in the world, the oldest cup competition in the world, etc., etc., etc. An FA Cup fixture between two teams from England's top flight on a Wednesday night is not televised anywhere around the world. I don't get it. I don't get it. I'm not saying that the Forest and Blackpool game shouldn't have been televised, but what I'm just saying is there's no reason why they both couldn't have been televised. And therefore, fans in America, fans in Australia, even fans in Liverpool that can't get the game, ultimately were not able to see it. And again, I just think that's really poor, and I ultimately don't think there's any excuse for that. A lot of fans were having to listen on the radio, like back in the day. I remember listening to Everton games on the radio all the time with my dad when we were away from home and I was a kid, and I wasn't able to go. I was constantly listening to games on the radio, and I'm sure it very much felt like that to those fans that were in at Goodison Park. But rest assured, you didn't miss much. You didn't miss much at all. It wasn't an awful lot going on whatsoever, and like I said, it just felt to me that everybody felt like it was just to get this one over and done with, and ultimately it's still a game of football that you've got to go out and win. So I'd rather Everton go out and win that game that nobody really wants to be at than not win that game that nobody really wants to be at, if you get me. And that is ultimately what we did. Obviously the manager made a few changes going into this one. We heard in his press conference that Seamus Coleman and Abdoulaye Doucouré wouldn't be available because of injuries, so it was no surprise to see Nathan Patterson back in the side. I thought it would be Arnaud Danjuma given the go-ahead for this one, considering he played against Aston Villa a few days earlier, and he'd done okay. I'm not saying he was great. I'm not saying he was absolutely brilliant, but he'd done okay. Got himself into some good areas. He created a couple of half opportunities for himself, but the manager went against that decision and instead started Andre Gomez, which ultimately ended up working brilliantly because Andre Gomez has scored the winning goal. And I think I said it on the instant match reaction, and I'll say it again here. I don't think there's another player in Everton's squad, in Everton's side, that could have done what Andre Gomez done. So thankfully the decision was made to start Andre Gomez. But I must admit, I do think it tells you a lot about Arnaud Danjuma's situation. As soon as I seen he wasn't in the starting 11, and then as soon as I saw Sean Dyche bringing Lewis Dobbin on instead of him, I think I turned to my dad and said, "That's him gone, isn't it? He's obviously out the door," because it just seemed like it was the sensible thing to do to start Danjuma, or certainly to throw him on in a period in the game where players were looking leggy and we just needed a little bit of pace. And for him to have not been brought on, then obviously the day following we had the news from Fabrizio Romano that he'd agreed a deal with Lyon, and it's just waiting for Everton's approval. I think Everton are getting to the stage now where they probably will look to bring in a replacement so they can let Danjuma go, because I just don't think it's working. I don't think it's working for Danjuma. I don't think it's working for Sean Dyche. and I don't think it's working for Everton. But I stick with my point that Everton should not be allowing Arnaud Danjuma to leave the football club without replacement. And I keep having this argument with fans all the time who say, yeah, but he's not done nothing, Cam, or he's not brought anything to the table, or it's not like he's been unbelievable this season. That isn't the point. The point isn't about how good he's been. The point is Danjuma is capable of coming on and causing defenders problems. He's capable of coming on and creating an opportunity. He's capable of coming on and putting himself about and working hard and ultimately causing problems to Premier League defenders. I'm not saying he does it every week, and I'm not saying he's done it enough, but if you lose that and you don't replace it, then you are weakening your squad, and that is a matter of fact. And Everton at the moment just simply cannot afford to weaken our squad any further. They can't. So ultimately, if we are going to let him go, which I've got no big issue around allowing him to leave, I don't think he's being great for Everton. I don't think it's particularly working, and I don't think he's somebody Sean Dyche favours. And ultimately, if the manager isn't going to play him, then there's very little point in being there. But like I said a couple of weeks ago, we absolutely need to bring in a replacement if we're going to allow him to leave. It would be madness to allow him to leave without a replacement. It really would. But yeah, as I said, interesting to see Andre Gomez back in the side. Interesting to see Nathan Patterson in there as well. And I thought from the first minute, or certainly the first 5 or 10 minutes, I thought the general, as I said, pace of the game and the general flow of the game was really, really slow. And I remember sitting there thinking, I can see this one being a drab 0-0 draw, which goes to extra time, which is not what any of us wanted, was it? Let's be honest. I mean, I think João Virginia deserves a statue outside of the park end for that save he made in the last minute, because I couldn't have thought of anything worse than sitting there for an extra 30, 45 minutes in that cold. But yeah, it just, like I said, it seemed a bit pre-season friendly-ish to me. Do you know what it felt like? It felt like a third place playoff game. A game between both sides that had lost the semi-final and were playing in almost, as I said, a third place playoff game to determine who finishes third in the competition. That's what it felt like. No, both teams almost, and I'm not saying this is the case, because obviously both sides wanted to win the game and had a plan to go out and win the game. And as I said, I'm not saying the Everton players didn't give enough effort or battle or whatever, but it just felt, as I said, like neither team were particularly that bothered. The intensity wasn't quite there, and that might be down to a number of reasons. It might be down to the fact that it was a replay and the players were already feeling a bit, couldn't be bothered with it. It might be down to the fact that we've had a lot of games in recent weeks, and players are tired and players are fatigued and players are just trying to get over the line and trying to make sure they get through games without picking up injuries, because we're getting a lot of injuries recently and they are hindering the side. And because we're unable to go into the January transfer market and bring players in, or certainly bring players in as freely as we would like to, and we've got to be a bit more clever about it, which means these deals take longer and it means these deals are harder to find. Maybe players are thinking, well, I don't really want to go and throw myself at that at 100 mile an hour, because if I pick up an injury, it's going to take the club a long time to find somebody to replace me, and maybe they won't do that, and then ultimately the club will suffer for that. So I don't know whether it was a case of that, or whether it was a case of just the manager's tactics, trying to slow the game down a little bit. And I think it's very possible that it was that, because often when we play Crystal Palace, and this is more, I think it's more evident when we play Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park away from home, they're a side that do often play quick football, do often get at you, do often create opportunities and ultimately put you in positions where you're uncomfortable, and they've got players with real pace and real ability on the counter-attack, players like Eze, players like Elise, who will, and are not afraid to get at defenders and put them under pressure. And Palace are a team that play a fast-paced, sort of game and like to hit teams on the attack with pace and power. And we saw that in the Premier League game at Selhurst Park not so long ago, where we ended up winning the game 3-2, but it was back and forth constantly. Within the opening 5 minutes, it was 1-1, and it was almost like, hang on, what's going on here? I mean, let me just get it up for I just want to see exactly what it was. But Palace do like to to play football quick and fast. Within the opening 5 minutes, it was 1-1. Everton scored in the opening minute, and then Eze scored the penalty in the 5th minute. So maybe that was a tactical difference by Sean Dyche. Maybe it was a tactical change to be able to sort of slow the game down and not play to the way they want to play and not play to their strengths and just have it cool and calm. And therefore it means that there's not too much pressure on us, but also it means that we're stopping them from playing their game. And as the Blues says, it was 2 counter-attacking teams worried about being caught out. It very much felt like that. It very much felt like a cautious performance from both sides. It very much felt like it was a case of both teams trying to avoid losing rather than trying to go and win the game. That's what it felt like to me. It felt like 2 sides that didn't want to lose as opposed to 2 sides that wanted to win. And that often makes for a very boring, game of football. And that's exactly what it was. It was a boring game of football with very few opportunities for either side. And it didn't help that it was absolutely freezing cold, does it either? I mean, I know I've gone on about that about 15 times already, but I'm going to keep going on about it because I just want everybody to know that wasn't at Goodison Park, just how cold it was. It was absolutely freezing. But yeah, I thought we started the game okay. As I said, other than the general game being very cautious and very slow and very lethargic, I thought Everton kept the ball well. We weren't great with the final ball. We struggled with the final ball, and I think that's something that has happened quite a lot recently, is that we struggle when it comes to the moment. And by the moment, what I mean is that moment where you can have a passage of play for 20, 30, 40 passes or 10, 15, but whatever it might be, and it can look brilliant and it can look absolutely excellent and, it can be fantastic, etc., etc., etc. But if there's nothing at the end of it, then it doesn't get remembered. Nobody remembers a passage of play where a team has played the ball 18 times around, each player, and then it's gone out for an opposition throw-in. Nobody remembers that. They remember it when the ball ends up in the back of the net, like when Beto scored against Newcastle United, and we were all absolutely made up about how the ball had been passed around and how well we'd kept possession in that moment. But when it doesn't come of anything, nobody remembers it. And I feel like that's been a problem with Everton of late, is that when it gets to that moment in the final third, be it one of the wingers needing to cross the ball in, be it one of the attacking midfielders needing to play a pass, or be it the centre forward needing to have a shot on goal, it just feels at the moment that the right decision is never taken, or if the right decision is taken, it's never executed properly. And that for me was exactly the issue on Wednesday night. I thought the defence were incredibly solid, although they didn't really have to do much. I thought they were incredibly solid. I thought Vitaly Michalenko was absolutely spot on again. I mean, how many games does this lad have to perform at this level before he starts getting the credit he deserves? He was fantastic. He was absolutely fantastic. I thought both centre-halves were incredibly solid as usual, and I thought Nathan Patterson done a relatively decent job at right-back as well. But I thought, like I said, I thought the defence and the midfield were absolutely sound. I thought it was Onana's best game, I thought, for a while, and I thought James Garner done really well as well. But ultimately, when both your wingers put in the performance that they did, and it was a shambles of a performance by both wingers. I know some people like to defend them. I know people, like to see the different side of it, but I'd struggle for, if anybody sat there and told me that either one of them two on Wednesday night, McNeil or Harrison, had a good game, because they didn't. The pair of them were absolutely terrible. And in that, it meant that Dom didn't have a great game, because we all know that Dominic Calvert-Lewin is not the type of striker that's going to grab the game by the scruff of the neck and create an opportunity for himself. He just isn't. He just isn't that type of player. He's not that type of player with the ability to single-handedly go and win a game of football, or single-handedly go and, take a team on and roll the ball into the back of the net. He's just not that player. So when McNeil and Harrison, or Dan Schumann and McNeil, or whoever it might be on those wings, when they don't perform and they are poor, it ultimately has a knock-on effect on whoever is up front, because Beto isn't the type of forward to do that as well. So, yeah, I thought that was where we really let ourselves down. Was when we had the ball in those forward areas. I thought the midfield done well at collecting it, and I thought Crystal Palace offered very little for the defence to have to do, as I said, until the last sort of 5 minutes. But every time one of the wingers got the ball, it just seemed like they ran into a defender every time. Whether it be Jack Harrison or Dwight McNeil, it just felt like every single time they picked up the ball, they just ran into danger. John says, if we had Richie and Gordon on the flanks, would we be top 7? Well, we wouldn't be top 7 because of the points deduction. Without the points deduction, Richarlison is somebody that I miss every single day as an Evertonian. Moments like Dobben's chance against Aston Villa, the one-on-one, where I just walk out to Goodison Park and I walk home and I just think, Richarlison buries that comfortably. He buries it comfortably and we walk away with a big 3 points. But he's gone now, and ultimately we've got to move on, and we've got to find a solution of being able to play and score goals and create chances without him there. As for Gordon, I think Gordon is much of a muchness. I think he's very similar to what we've got now. I think he's got quality and he can show it, but more often than not, he just runs himself into dangerous areas and runs himself into defenders. So yeah, I'm not too fussed on Anthony Gordon, to be honest. But Richarlison, as I said, I miss that fella every single day. But yeah, we had a couple of opportunities in that first half. We had a couple of opportunities in that first half. Dom's had a shot which has been comfortably saved. We had another couple of half chances that fell in the box, and ultimately we never took advantage of. I think Johnson had to make one sort of save where he's tipped it over the bar. We had a couple of corners as well, but other than that, not an awful lot. Palace up the other end, João Virginia had to make one save, I think, where it was blasted right at him and he got over it and he saved it, and other than that there was nothing happening whatsoever. We then get the free kick. Now, the free kick comes at a perfect time because A, it's just before half time, which is ideal. If you want to score a goal, you want to score it just before half time. It completely takes the wind out of the sails of the opposition team. But also, I don't know if anybody has watched the foul that leads to the free kick, that leads to the goal again. But just go and watch it again for me and tell me that it isn't a straight red card, because I just don't understand in any world how that challenge hasn't gone to VAR and hasn't been checked. Simon says, all right, mate, very hot here, getting peed in the Philippines, 32 degrees. Is right, my mate, enjoy yourself. I assume you're on holiday, maybe you live there, whichever way it is. Enjoy yourself, my mate. Says, love the show from Simon and my daughter, Simone. Be safe, mate. Thank you very much, my mate, really appreciate it. He also just says, my daughter and wife waiting for you to say hello. Hello. Hope you're all doing well. But yeah, like I said, for me, the foul that leads to the free kick is, I wish I could put a video replay of it up now or a picture, but I couldn't because I'd be copyright strike by the FA and whoever else. But go and watch it again. It's on our Twitter, MightyBlues YT, if you haven't followed us already. It's a shocker. It's an absolute shocker, and it just leads you to think, doesn't it? If this is the exact same game as the one that was played at Selhurst Park a couple of weeks ago, in more than one sense, it's still an FA Cup third round game. It's a replay, so it's a replay of that game, and also that game was quite dull and quite slow and quite lethargic as well. And yet in one game, you've got a player sliding in with his leg and his feet down, his boot aimed towards the floor, scoops a ball round and is sent off for what was minimal contact. And then in another game, you've got a player lunging with 2 feet off the ground, making contact, regardless of how much contact there was, making contact. The referee has given a free kick, so therefore he's determined it a foul. It doesn't even go to VAR. Now, obviously, there isn't much attention around this because Everton have won the game, and sometimes I get to a point where I'll be sitting off camera, or I'll be sitting, at home later tonight watching a film, and I'll think, am I just moaning too much? Am I just picking up on things for the sake of picking up on things? Am I just looking for things to moan about and looking for things to groan about? And I say that because I think it, and I get comments, as we all do, oh, you're just moaning for the sake of moaning, blah, 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 blah. But I think if we don't continue to bring these things up, and we don't continue to discuss them, then they'll never change. And I appreciate that there might not have been a lot of contact on Andre Gomez, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But Dominic Calvert-Lewin was sent off for not a lot of contact a week ago, and yes, it was rescinded. And yes, it was determined that it shouldn't have been a red card. And then you could say, well, if that was rescinded and determined it shouldn't have been a red card, then why should this one be, Cam? But I guarantee you that if that was the other way round, and that was an Everton player lunging in with 2 feet off the ground like that against the Palace player, it would have been given as a sending off. It would have been given as a sending off 100%. And we'd now be in a position where we were once again having to defend a player who's made the challenge. But regardless of, we barely touched them, and you said Calvert-Lewin's wasn't a red card because he barely touched them. Dom slides in with his foot like that, his studs angled towards the ball, and scooped, and he was always in control of the ball. He was always in control of scooping the ball around, barely touched the player, got a sending off. That is completely different to a player jumping in, lunging in with 2 feet off the ground and the studs up like that towards a player. Completely different, regardless if he barely made any contact. It's not an argument of, well, they both barely made any contact, so therefore they're both the same. No, that's not the argument. The argument is, well, Dom barely made any contact, and he was very clearly going for the ball. He very clearly had no malicious intent or no intent to endanger or hurt the opponent. Whereas the Palace player, I can't remember who it was, somebody will tell me in the comments, has jumped with 2 feet off the ground towards Andre Gomez in a lunge manner. If he connects, he breaks his leg. He breaks his leg. If Dom connects fully, he probably gives Nathaniel Klein a little bit of a bruise because Dom's supporting his own weight. His leg isn't stretched out. There's no maliciousness. There's no pressure in the challenge. So he may give Nathaniel Klein a couple of stud marks on his leg. That's it. Jefferson Lerma, cheers Blues. Jefferson Lerma, if he connects, breaks Andre Gomez's legs. So how is that seen as the same challenge? It's a sending off all day. I don't give a fuck if we won the game, and I don't give a fuck what people say. It's a sending off all day long. It isn't given. Shock. It isn't given. And ultimately, Crystal Palace have been made to pay for it because Gomez himself then steps up and curls one into the back of the net, which is an absolutely wonderful, wonderful, wonderful free kick. As I've said before, for me, it is a shame with Andre because he's obviously a talented player. He's obviously somebody that has got, a lot of talent and a lot of ability. And as I said last week, you don't play for Barcelona without that talent and without that ability. But he just isn't quite quick enough to keep up with the game in this country, is he? He just isn't quite quick enough to keep up with the demands of Premier League football. And even on Wednesday, even the goal on Wednesday was a fantastic free kick and a really well taken set piece, and again he showed his ability and he showed his quality and he showed his football and IQ as well by even having the nous to do that and knowing where exactly to place it. But for the rest of the game, I thought he was pretty average. I did. I'll be honest, I thought he was pretty average. I thought he worked hard. He ran round and off the ball, I thought he done well, but there was one moment, I know Ped's talked about it on Toffee TV, where he gets put in through one-on-one effectively. He's not quite one-on-one, but if he's even remotely quicker or a little bit quicker than what he is, he's one-on-one with the keeper and he doesn't even attempt to take it on. He just turns back. He just cuts back because he knows he hasn't got the pace to go and to go and create a chance out of that. And that, for me, tells you what you need to know about Andre Gomez. Technically, he's got ability, and I think he's somebody that just um, may just have a part to play in this current Everton side, and a part to play before the end of the season because of that ability. And sometimes that's all you need. Sometimes you just need somebody that can find that, final ball, or somebody that can put that free kick into the back of the net, or hit that shot from outside the box on the rebound and put it in. Sometimes you need that. So there's every chance he could have a big role to play between now and the end of the season. But as in genuine as a Premier League central midfielder, I just don't think he's quick enough. I don't think he's got the pace. I don't think he's got the speed, to be perfectly honest. And I think that was on show again on Wednesday. But the free kick, you can't take anything away from him. The free kick is absolutely unbelievable. It's an unbelievable effort, and it's an unbelievable goal. And if that's the little bit of quality that he can produce and he can bring to this side, then I've got no problem with him coming on in games and when we need to find that quality. But starting week in, week out in the league, it probably isn't going to happen. And then, as I said, we go in at half time, we come back out for the second half, and it's much of the same, isn't it? Neither team really applying the pressure. Neither team really looking like they're going to go and get a goal, or they're going to go and get back into the game in Palace's situation. But again, a really dry second half, and up until the board went up, and then Palace had a couple of chances. They had a couple of opportunities. I think Mikalenko does brilliant on a couple of them, just to put the forwards off, and just to halt the forwards from making their decision quicker and ultimately taking a shot on goal. And as we spoke about before, I think João Virginia does brilliantly. His first save, where he comes out and he makes himself big, is absolutely fantastic. And then he makes another couple of saves in the midst of it as well, and sees us through the game. And like I said before, it wasn't the most entertaining game of football in the world. It wasn't the best performance, and it certainly wasn't the best display. But what it was is a win, and an important win, and not only an important win in a cup competition, but an important win in the grand scheme of where we are at the moment, and in the grand scheme of the week that we've just had. We needed that win after the news on Monday. We really, really did need that win, and it's given us a little bit of excitement and a little bit of hope moving forward, and hopefully, and that's ultimately all the manager has to do, is just keep getting their head down, players getting their head down, and winning games of football, because that will ultimately make everything better. Whatever's going on off the pitch, whatever's going on with the points deductions and the Premier League, etc., etc., if Everton can just get their head down and keep winning football, then we'll all feel much better about the situation. So there you go. We're going to leave it there. If you have enjoyed this one, please do leave a like. We will be back on Monday. I'm going to have a little bit of a weekend off, unless something breaks, of course. If something breaks, we'll be back. But if not, I'm going to have a little bit of a weekend off and enjoy myself, because it's been quite a manic week. So yeah, we'll be back on Monday if there's no news. If you have enjoyed it, please do hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new. Please go and check out the video from yesterday. It'd mean a huge amount to me if you could. Big thank you all for watching, and we'll see you after.